Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dan Smith from Marquette. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're a Teams university, so I'm figuring out where all the buttons are. So can everybody see my shared screen at this point?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, got it.
Yep.
Super, thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our minor capital selection process. I've been at Marquette a long time, and we started this, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. And at that time, we did it. Well, before I get to that, let me talk about who Marquette is. You might not know. So we are, I would call it mid-sized university in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about an hour and a half north of Chicago. ITS has about 76 employees, plus or minus. You see our areas there. Our PMO has 6 full-time PMs and a BA. And then I'm the deputy CIO, also the head of the PMO. And I've been at Marquette for, it'll be 25 years in February. So that's a long time, or so it seems to me. I grew up in Arkansas, so I don't relate to all these snow conversations we had previously. And so it's just stupid cold up here as far as I'm concerned. All right, so our portfolio management and selection process. So like I said, we started this years ago, and we did it because before we had our current process, it seemed like a black hole to a lot of people. They submit projects and they didn't know how they were getting approved, who were they approving them, and all they saw at the end of the process was, here's what's approved and here's not. And so we made a pitch that we can do these sorts of things. One of the key things is the visibility. So the listing of all projects and then documenting how we prioritize those particular projects. We hope to have a little bit of better alignment with our strategic plan, a little bit more of a structured approach. And then from an efficiency standpoint inside of us and facilities, maybe some better capacity planning and scheduling as we do this sort of stuff. And so our process started with the formation of a committee. Like most things in higher ed, you have to have a committee to do things. So we have the University Planning and Infrastructure Committee, UPIC. It's a cross-functional team with administrative and academic representation, and those members rotate every couple of years, but we have a standing body of ITS, facilities, and the budget office. So those 3 areas are represented throughout the years on this particular team. And so we do have a combined effort between facilities and IT in selecting projects, and budget office, of course, allocates money. This committee will contribute to the minor capital prioritization. So they advise on the selection of which projects we're going to do and which we're not going to do. We hope to have better alignment with our strategic direction. The budget office secures the funding for the approved projects. And then they help us balance the portfolio to support the desired mix of university needs. So, for example, if College of Engineering has submitted projects 3 years in a row, we might say, we're not doing it this year. We're going to give that money to somebody else to do something they might need to do. So typically our process is, and as Erin said, if you have questions, it's a relatively small group, just interrupt. So we have the sponsor proposes a project and writes an executive summary and a justification statement. We also ask them to rate their projects using drivers that we use in OnePlan, which is our PPM tool, and I will show you that in a minute. Then the project staff, either facilities or IT, works with the project sponsor to develop a budget and scope, or whoever the sponsor designates. So they say it's going to cost $10,000. We might get into it and say, oh no, it's $30,000. So we have to go through that drill every year, meeting with all these folks to do that. And then we rank those projects in OnePlan against what available budget we have. And so, and you'll see that a little bit more, probably be a little bit more clear. So again, we have our drivers defined, and we only have to do this once. And we've done it for the last 2 years. We haven't changed it. And we can perform it as often as we need to. So if we want to go and reorganize these drivers every year, we could do that if we wanted to. So we rate each project against the drivers, and UPIC reserves the right to review those ratings. So if somebody marks all of those as extreme, we get to go in and change those scores if we think if they're trying to cheat or game the system. Once we have those rankings, we look at the available funding we have, we force in and out based on mandates, regulations, laws, all that kind of stuff. We come up with a list, and we then turn that over to a different committee, the University Financial Planning Committee, and they submit to the president and the board of trustees for approval. Since I've been here, UFPRC have never thrown it back and say, do this again, this is not right. So we think based on that, we have a pretty good process for submitting these projects forward. And then, again, this is an annual process that we do. So drivers and evaluation. So these are our current drivers. So campus safety, risk of not doing, return on investment, operational efficiency. And the last three, healthy campus, care for the world, and thriving students, are all part of the strategic plan. Those are the three legs of our strategic plan. Campus safety is not just physical safety. It's, also OSHA. It's all those sorts of things that encompass. A large chunk of it is physical safety, whether it be new cameras or door locks or whatever the case may be. Risk of not doing is more of this is going to fail in a year unless we do something, or this is already failing, we got to do something. So that's the risk of not doing. Return on investment and operational efficiency are just what they say. And you will see in the next slide how we score these. So they're not weighted equally. They're weighted. So the drivers, I just took a screenshot of two of them, campus safety and risk of not doing. So you can kind of see, we send this out with the call for projects. So the people who are submitting the projects have an idea of where they should rate their particular projects, whether it be none or extreme. And we try to remove some of the subjectivity, but of course it's going to be somewhat subjective in the eyes of the beholder. But we have one of these for each of those drivers that I've listed previously. And then talk about the ratings. Here are the ratings. So campus safety is number one. Risk of not doing is second. And of course, return on investment is the lowest. So we, probably most of you guys don't do a lot of return on investment. Neither do we. So any questions so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you make sure people don't game the system? I mean, if you give them the rubrics here of how things are going to be measured, I mean, all I got to do is answer correctly, and my project's going to be top project. Yeah,
and so we don't give them the driver weighting. We don't give them this slide, so they don't know that. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is when we go in and look at a project, they rated this as extreme for campus safety. It has nothing to do with campus safety. So we can go back and readjust that rating.
Okay.
As our UPIC committee group. Good question though, because we had the same question when we started.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry, I joined late and I just think I caught where maybe you opened with that you do an annual call for projects. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we do an annual call for the minor capital projects. So that's part that has to go to the board for approval. I will be the first to admit that we get thrown projects all the time, more of an ad hoc thing, and we don't go through this rigorous of a process with those. That's more of a, do you have the money and do we have the time sort of situation. But this is our number one thing that takes priority, because when we're committed to do one of these particular projects as part of UPIC, that's top priority.
Okay, so let me just follow up with that then.
Mm-hmm.
So for capital projects, in order to facilitate, make sure you've got the resources, the funding, and all of the things you're running through this process. For other things, so projects such as someone failed to let you know that they have a contract that is ending or something is changing with a vendor, that would just come in from the side and you're just fitting that into your project schedule?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
So this is Jeff. If I could I make a comment or ask a question on your rubrics there?
Yeah.
So I believe it was Jasper asked the question about end runs. My experience has been it usually works well to completely publish all the rubrics, including the weightings, for two reasons. One is that people tend to start self-selecting and trying to generate project proposals that do meet the overall drivers and the criteria. And the second is it starts to promote transparency and trust in the system if it's all completely visible. How does that line up with your experience?
We haven't had anybody ask us what are the weightings of the different things. Now, maybe they figured it out somewhat anecdotally. In other words, they moved the campus safety rating around and they can see what the score does. So they can say, oh, that must be pretty heavily weighted. But I don't, nobody's asked us for it, so we haven't felt a need to publish it. You make a good point that it's more transparent if you do publish it. And since we reserve the right to change the scores, we think somebody's trying to game the system. It probably wouldn't be any harm in publishing it. We just, we don't want people nitpicking. Why is that 27 versus, the strategic plan should be the highest thing of all, right? Why isn't that the highest thing of all, right?
So why is it 6.3 instead of 5.9?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Dan, Charlie Moran, quick question for you. As a couple of questions. One, how do you handle multi-year projects? Do you go back and reevaluate them? Are they doing what they said they were going to do? Or is it just, hey, full speed ahead and it's not part of the problem?
Yeah, we don't typically go back and evaluate them to say, did they deliver on what you said?
Okay.
That would be a dream state that we would actually do that, but we're not doing that today. Somewhat related though, I'm sure a lot of you are facing budget issues in your areas because of the cliff of students or headwinds of higher education or whatever you want to call it. So we started this summer with a process for evaluating what things we can get rid of and what benefits they might provide. And the benefits are measured in financial relief from the university. So one of ours is we're going to transition some blue light phones to cell versus AT&T lease line and save, I don't know, $60,000 a year or whatever it is. We have a list of 140 projects right now that we're running through our tool to be able to say we're going to save X amount of dollars in fiscal years 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. And we are actually going to be measuring, did you achieve those savings or didn't you achieve those savings? And that's kind of our first entry into this. And it's not a small entry. I mean, we jumped into deep into the pool on this one, I think. And so since we've never done this sort of thing before, and I could show you some screenshots of what we have, but we have a lot of work going into this. And we don't want to get too crazy. For the complex projects, we have a full schedule in this area, but for most of the projects where they say they're going to cut X amount of dollars, it's just kind of a milestone based schedule. You're going to do these milestones by these dates, and you're going to achieve this savings by that date. So we have started doing that, Charlie, but not in relationship to these minor capital projects.
Cool. Just one other quick question. When these pile of things come zooming in because you've announced, hey, send us your proposals, is the committee just IT people? Is the committee cross campus? Because we've done it a couple different ways, and cross campus participation. It's always fun to have somebody like the registrar call BS on something. That is not campus safety. What the hell is it? And
yeah, we have somebody from the provost office. We have 2 faculty members. We have
nice.
That sort of thing. So we do have a cross-functional team, and they help us with those sort of calls. So it doesn't have to be IT or facilities being the bad guys. Now, often they look to us and say, "Hey, do you think this is really this?" And we'll say, "I don't think so." And so then, but that committee is the ones that actually makes the decision. It doesn't come from IT or facilities.
Thanks.
You bet.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Quick question. Are there any aspects, the focus here seems to be capital/enterprise level projects, which are generally pretty expensive and involve central IT and other central folks. But are there any aspects of this that have been adopted within some of your larger departments and colleges to help them manage kind of internal, perhaps expensive projects that are more isolated?
No, but we would want to be involved with those sorts of projects. So if it's an expensive project, we're a central IT. There are some split outs, like library have their own IT staff, and engineering has a
Yeah.
couple of people, that sort of stuff. But we still, if it's a major enterprise project, we would like to be involved in the managing of that project. So we're involved.
But is there a criteria that brings it up to your level? So like at the College of Engineering, for example, was doing a major AV upgrade or something of that nature to the tune of a couple $100,000, you know, or even 100,000. But it was pretty much just isolated to that college. Would it rise to your level and be represented in your portfolio or anything like that?
Yeah, it would. I mean, that's we're doing something like that right now. So yes, I mean,
Okay.
and I think we've had good success in helping them with these projects. So, one of the people in the dental school, which can be hard to wrangle sometimes. You know, he came to us and said, "Look, I have to deal with 3 different vendors and 2 sections of IT to get these sort of things done. I'd really appreciate a project manager to help me coordinate this sort of stuff." And so I think people have realized that value over time. And so rarely, we do still get the wild rogue efforts, right? We have a case right now where our spirit shop is putting in a new e-commerce system without us even knowing about it. And they came and asked for a DNS change. And we said, "Why do you want a DNS change?" And then they explained what they're doing. And we said, "You realize this has got PCI implications and all this other stuff, and accessibility from a VPAT perspective." And we hadn't even looked at it for security. And so we kind of said, "No, we're not going to make any DNS changes until we get through all these other hoops. And oh, by the way, if you got us in at the front of this thing, you wouldn't be being delayed right now." So, and we still have some rogue projects that happen, but those
Does that still go through like the annual review process, you know, by this larger committee, or are they just leveraging your PMO services?
That one should have gone through the annual review process, in my opinion. But they, you know, it's one of those things that if they have the money, they feel like they can go, right? But still,
yeah,
at a minimum, IT reviews all contracts from a VPAT, accessibility, and security perspective at a very minimum. I don't know how this got by that, because I talked to our general counsel. They go, "Yeah, we don't know anything about it either." And so somehow they got paperwork signed without going through any of the process. So I got to give them points for that, I guess.
Yeah. All right, great. Thanks. It's great information, obviously, from all these questions. So appreciate you taking the time.
You bet. Yeah. So somebody put in chat, "What's a minor capital project?" And that's kind of subjective. The major projects are like the big buildings that go up and, 60 million, that sort of stuff. Minor capital doesn't have a specific dollar threshold, but when you look at our minor capital budget this year, for example, minor capital comes from the depreciation of current assets. And so right today, that section of the budget has a lot of things in it, but one line item in it are the projects for all the different things that people submit. And it was only 500,000 this year, which is the lowest it's ever been. And so going through this whole process for that amount of money seems a little bit of an effort, but at the same time, it still shows that transparency that we're trying to foster. So it's good from that perspective. But, back 5-6 years ago, we had $1 million plus we were doing with these projects. So we had a lot of projects that we could get done out of that minor cap. But our minor cap budget is becoming smaller and smaller over the time, it seems. All right, this is our one plan screen, just to kind of give a little bit of a sense. So this is this one came through the process. It's to replace our residential management system. This is the project submission form, and then you see the fields that we collect, and there's some more on here that I didn't show, just a screenshot. But the executive summary and university need and justification. That's kind of a high level. When we actually turn this over to PM, that gets a little bit more meat behind it. We also have blocks for deliverables and all that kind of stuff. So all the stuff that would be probably in a business case, we have in our tool. And then also in our tool, project risk and complexity, we have an algorithm for this. We don't use this in our selection process. Really, we use it when we turn it into a project to get a risk score on our projects or complexity score. And this is, I think we stole the concept of this from LMU, maybe, or Chicago. I guess it was Chicago. And then we tweaked it a little bit. And it's, we just changed these criteria, changed the formula to meet what we think is right. So, if we change the scope from clearly defined to not clearly defined, or whatever the other options are, it will change that complexity score. Or if the cost goes up, it would make the complexity go up. As a team, similarly. So this is just risk and complexity to kind of give us the idea of maybe one project manager may be more suited than another if it's really a high risk and complexity sort of effort. But down here in the bottom part of the screen is our driver prioritization. So campus safety, risk of not doing, operational efficiency, effectiveness, and then we get a score. So this one got a score of 60, and that's out of 100. When we go over, I'm sorry, this, and then in our tool, I was on the details page. Can I do this? Yeah, I was on the details page up here. Now I'm on the financials page. And again, this is early in the process, so we don't have a lot of details yet. And we break this out a little bit more when we actually get going. But this is all we need for project selection, knowing we're going to spend about $100,000 on implementation. So that's the minor capital ask that we're going in with this project to get. And then for our ratings, here's our minor capital, fiscal 26 minor capital. Here are the 4 projects that were approved. Here's their estimated cost for those approval and the driver risk score. You might say, well, down here, you have a project that is rated higher than these 2. Why wasn't it in the mix? It would certainly fit from a price perspective. And that's because like Rayner's second floor, 75,000, but we have a restricted account that's going to, in effect, double that money to allow us to do things to provide more students. So we take into consideration things like that when we debate these things, saying we really should get this done while that money is available to us. And this, we also have restricted money available for that repair, which is why it got thrown into the mix. This one didn't get thrown in the mix because that's actually part of a new building project. So we're going to incorporate that into the scope of that new building. So having facilities and IT in the room, we can say, well, yeah, they submitted that, but really that's part of a broader overall project, and we don't need to select it for the minor cap. And you can see we had 7.8 million of projects that weren't selected, and people were submitting really big things that probably weren't even minor cap. They were submitting something like replace the HVAC system for the dental school. And that's not a minor cap. That's more of a major project. But we said our stance is go ahead and submit it so we're aware of the need if we weren't already aware of the need, and we have it. And they would use the project in our system to run it through the process anyway. So when we have a project and we need a CIP, which is a capital account that we can put the money in for the projects, that data comes out of our PPM system. We then drop a document in DocuSign that flows through IT or facilities up to budget office and then up to finance to create that CIP. So we don't manually enter that data anymore. We have a report that runs to pull the data out of the project system. And I really like doing that because, one, that makes sure the project system is up to date. And when they want to get a CIP account, they have to make sure they have a project entered and the financials are correct in order to get that CIP account. So since Charlie brought it up, this is our what we're doing now. So we have the facilities portfolio and the ITS portfolio here. And then we have the specific recommendations. So we have all of these programs, and underneath, I'll pick IT. I know I can share that one without getting punished. If I click on IT, we have these projects underneath IT. We're doing those as part of this Securing Our Future is what it was called thing. And so we're expecting for the blue light phones to get 90,000 benefit over those times. And the cell phone policy, we're not going to get 250. I had to tell my boss that yesterday. We're going to develop a new chat bot. We're going to get some savings there. So these are the savings we expect to gain between fiscal year 26 and 31 for doing these projects. And you can see if you look at some of the other ones, College of Health Sciences is 1.3 million. College of Nursing is 1.1 million. Some of those benefits are cost savings, and some of them are we'll get more students in this particular program, so it's a cost, you know, bringing more cash into the university. So it's a big effort. We have several people working on this particular effort, and then this is going to the deans and VPs this month. They're certainly aware of this. They've committed to all these savings already, but they'll have a dashboard that they'll be able to go in and look at their particular projects and where they are on the milestones and that sort of stuff. So if I go into IT, for example, blue light phones, there's my budget, and their benefits will be over here. And then if I go work plan over here, this will be my schedule, again, fairly high level. And there's my milestones for the blue light phone project. So that's all I had to share, unless there are more questions.
I got a question. It's about one plan. How do you like it? I mean, it looks pretty useful for you.
We were longtime users of Project Online. So we started off with the Project Server back a long time ago. Then we went to Project Online, and then Project Online. If you're familiar with the Microsoft, they were no longer developing features in it, and so it was clear they're going to be deprecating it at some point in the future. And the first thing to be going away were the workflow tools. So we route for approval. So when I go to one plan here, if I take this blue light phone work plan, and to go from planning to execution, it goes through the PMO head, either facilities or IT, and then it goes up to the budget office, and they have to approve it as well before it will go to this execution stage. So that was going away. The process was going away in Project Online. So we had to select a new tool. I think the tool, I like it a lot so far. The only thing I don't like about it is one thing they really advertised was being able to integrate with other tools. So if I come down here to select Jennifer's projects. So Jennifer has a couple of projects, and you see here she has Project for the Web integrated with this particular project, because Project for the Web is, I don't know if you played around with that, but it has some nice features. So what that means is you can do your work management in Project for the Web, yet you would be able to have all your other stuff. You still have your detail sheet, your financial sheet, your resource plan. The only thing that Project for the Web doing is your work management stuff, right? And all that stuff is there in the work management, and that's coming in from Project for the Web. That integration is not what I'd really like to see. And they promised me it's on their roadmap to fix here early in this calendar year. And they've already done it with Planner, but they've changed it to a bi-directional interface, which is really what we want to see. So you could update it in either place and would flow to the other. So once they deliver on that, I will be extremely happy with the tool. Right now, that's the only thing kind of holding me back from a wholehearted 100%. But their claim to fame is the integration. In other words, they integrate with Azure DevOps. They integrate with other tools, other Agile tools, not just in the Microsoft stack. And so, I mean, and the resource plan is easy to use as well. You can make it as detailed or as complex as you like. So in this one, Jennifer just has herself in there for this period of time. But other projects you'll go through and look, and they have the key resources and put their work allocations in there. And it also has a timesheet functionality if you want to do that. So it seems to have everything that we need. And like I said, if they get that integration fixed, that would be great.
So just a follow up to that, since you are just tracking the capital projects through this methodology, the other things that come in from the side, how are you tracking those resources, and where do they fall within these other major projects?
We are tracking all of our projects in one plan. What I was intending to say is they don't go through that UPIC process to get into one plan, right? Well, you can see Jennifer's projects here. She has a small conference room AV thing she's doing. She has a JZoo renovation. She has a corporate engagement, on and on and on. Point and Click is our new medical system. So all the projects are in there. But then the green ones are the ones that are the, the security or the strategic projects that we talked about earlier. Good question, though.
What's the Teams icon represent there? Is that every project has an associated team site that's got that icon, or what?
Yes, exactly. So we make heavy use of Teams in our environment. So that's our document sharing repository, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm just kicking off one now myself, where my project's here, and I have just kicking off the net documents implementation. I have a Teams icon for that. So that means when I go into a particular project, you see the Teams icon here. If I click on that and it doesn't already exist, it will set up that Teams site for me and put the people in it. And so that's kind of slick.
Nice.
That's very nice.
Awesome. So
That's
Teams
really
is
nice.
becoming your document. Teams is becoming the document repository for the project information.
Yep.
Okay. That's great.
And that's where we do a
We're
lot of our
trying to bring it
collaboration and
all
stuff.
together.
Yeah. I mean, we were
You have
doing
a
that with
definition project.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, we were doing that with Project Online too, but it was all manual. In other words, we'd set up the project and we'd have to go build a team set separately and make sure the names matched, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we do. If I could bring up I have a knowledge article that's in our help desk tool that shows what a project is and that sort of stuff.
Oh, nice.
I can
Love to see that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's open to the outside world, but if it's not, I can break a copy and send it out to Erin and she could post it if you guys would like to see it.
That's great.
Do your budgets include the cost of your resources? Are you tracking any of that? So we have a number of projects that we handle internally, right? And there's kind of there's a cost time, if you will, that's attributed to those projects. And then, as you mentioned, you've got the major projects, which you're buying something and you've got resources that are allocated. So is there anything else that's included in the budget when you're documenting this?
So we don't track internal resources for their time and effort. We like to say we're free. And that's the way people treat us sometimes. So, but you can see for this one, in this software licenses, there's the implementation, the Medicat subscription, and the account number and OPEX or CAPEX and how much that money is. And then she has a contingency on this now. I mean, this can be as much or as little you want to track, but it does then float up to give you the overall budget of the project. We're just starting to use timesheets on certain critical resources. And I think that's going to be, we'll see how that goes as far as getting people to record their time. I know a lot of people find that onerous, but I don't think it should be. It's pretty easy to do in the tool. So, but we're implementing a student success CRM. We're using Slate for that. And since that was a innovative sort of thing, we haven't done a student success CRM before. We want to track the time on those critical resources just to make sure they're not overwhelming themselves.
Sure. So we use Salesforce and we have a level of effort that my teams use. I don't think we use it broadly across ITS, but we do for any of our maintenance tasks, any of our project tasks, for each one of them, just as an estimation. Nobody's, looking at minutes, but as an estimation, where are you spending your time, so that we can go back to see what traditionally does it take us in the way to complete an integration for, you know, project A or whatnot. So,
Right.
but it is a hurdle. I will say that, to get people past the big brother's watching me.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, people always seem to jump to the fact that, oh, you're looking for a way to get rid of me, right?
Mhm.
Therefore, if you're not contributing enough effort. So I've started with project managers, and they're pretty good at this. They're not perfect by any stretch, but you can see where some of my PMs are over allocated. I'm sure Eric is out here where he's putting together new wellness and rec, and his commitment for those last 3 months was really high. And if I open up Eric, you can see wellness and rec was sucking up a lot of his time. So this helps me to say, oh, I got a new project. Who can I give it to? Well, not Eric. Let me go. And I just don't drop it in somebody's lap without talking to him. But, you know, with this, I know I don't even have to talk to Eric, right? Because there's no way in double hockey sticks he's going to be able to take this on. Anything else? Once, twice?
Dan, would you be able to share your executive summary or a template that the sponsor fills out, or even their justification statement? Like what does that look like?
It depends on who submits it. But these are the projects we had under UPIC review. And these are the projects that were approved. And so when somebody goes in to submit a project, new project request, and I can go in and delete this later. Hope I don't have a test already. So they would go in and do this process. And then this window opens up, and this is what we're asking for. So executive summary, it's just text boxes to go in and fill this out. And then this is where they come in and do the, you know, campus safety, none to extreme. This is where they fill that in. We also say, ask them, do you have funding available? Which is always an interesting question when they don't know really how much it costs. We're asking them if they have the money for it. But at least that gives a sense that they have some money they want to put toward it. So we don't have any
Not specific criteria that they have to
Yeah.
put in there. It's just a
Exactly.
summary of what they're trying to
right.
accomplish.
And if they have a good justification, like my room is used, you know, 3 days a week for classes and the AV system has failed, you know, that's good knowledge to know for that justification. But like I said, we have to go back and work with them after they submit it to get better budgets and better scope. And so we might need to beef it up sometimes to get that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Erin, back to you.
Thank you for that. I was also just kind of chatting with Sheila, who's on my team, and she's on the call. And so we're using Smartsheet for our project and portfolio management. So we use it for everything from intake to managing the whole portfolio to managing the projects. And we're really dipping our toes into resource management at this point. We're different in that, like, we will never ask people to record time. Everybody seems to feel like Big Brother is watching. So we're using our best effort, kind of like percentage of time, or, you know, kind of like spitballing hours. And so I was just asking Sheila if she had anything she wanted to share like this go around, if that would be interesting to folks, or otherwise we might want to pick this up as a topic, maybe, you know, in this next month. We want to think about different tools that people are using.
Yeah, and I don't get a kickback from one plan, but they also integrate in with Smart Sheets. So you know, so if you're using Smart Sheet, it's just your work tool. And I'm not that familiar with Smart Sheets, so I don't know if they have the same features as far as, you know, budget stuff and resource stuff and that sort of stuff. But they do integrate in with Smart Sheets. Yeah, we looked at Team Dynamics, but we don't use them for our support desk, so it really didn't. And we heard, I don't know if this is true, the Team Dynamics was kind of not investing a lot in their PPM tool anymore. When we did our evaluation, maybe somebody who's using Team Dynamics will say that's not true.
I think that is true, Dan.
Oh, you think it is true? Okay.
Yeah, they're doing some new changing to their interface and some of some new functionality, but the existing PPM functionality is it's minor things that they invest in.
Yeah.
Still a great tool. We love it here at the University of Delaware.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. But that scared me a little bit when we started looking at tools. But back in the day, we selected PeopleSoft as our student system because it was a big company and it wasn't going away. And within a year, Oracle bought them. So you never know what's going to happen to software vendors.
Yeah, maybe it might be interesting afterwards. Maybe what we'll do is send out like a little Google survey to see what tools everyone is using. We'll send it out to the big IT governance group. I know like we've had Smartsheet for I guess about 2 years now, which is nuts. But we at that time looked at all of the same thing. We looked at TDX, we looked at Smartsheet, we looked at all the different tools. And for us, like TDX looked to me a little bit kind of like 1984. I didn't really like the interface for it. And like I loved like all of like the dashboard reporting and everything that Smartsheet offered was a little bit, I don't know, kind of more modern to me, if you will. But we'll send one out afterwards. It'd be interesting to see what people are using. And we can always do some breakout groups. Like I would be interested in like the Smartsheet schools to see how you're using it and things that we might build because it's still a work in process for us. Like we've come a long way, but even somebody was talking about the idea of like the progress board. Sheila was just mentioning to me, she's like, oh, we should put that on. That's a good idea. And I'm like, oh, that is cool. So.
If you do this, Troy, if you do the survey, you might add one column, which is, do you think you'll still be using it in 3 years or 5 years?
Yeah, that point. Yeah, good point. Or who's looking now? You know what I mean? Like already. So, I don't know, Sheila, if you want to add anything on.
I was just saying I can we can work on a survey and send it out to the group so we can make sure we capture everybody's input and then figure out what that means from either other demos or discussions or breakouts.
Yeah, question for Dan on your presentation. You talked about an annual call for project proposals. How do you handle mid-cycle changes or emerging needs, or are there any?
Yeah, no, we have 100% perfect planning, and so there's never any of those. No, I'm being silly. So the call is only for that minor capital stuff, right? But it's things happen, right? Things break down, and we had a boiler last year go out, and so facilities reaches out to our budget office. They will say, okay, because they always keep money somewhere. I don't know where they keep it, but they have money to do those sorts of repairs in the emergency. We would then generate a project in the system. They would flow that up to get it approved by. So in that workflow step, to get a CIP account, and budget would insist on this CIP account, which is capital improvement project. So that's where they put capital funds for something like that. They would insist on that, and they would insist on that project being in one plan before they would give them the funds. And so that's the kind of, I guess, guarantee that we're tracking all the projects we should be tracking in one plan. Facilities kind of operates on their own unless they need help from me to do something. I'm like the overall admin of one plan. That's why I can see across all the sectors, but facilities can see IT projects and we can see their projects because we think it's fine. We don't have any concerns, but for those other projects, those strategic projects, not everybody can see all those, right? So unless you're assigned to one of those projects, you don't get to see them. So did that answer your question, that it's kind of an ad hoc thing that if something breaks or something comes up, they just take care of it in the moment?
Yeah, that's great. That's fine. Some of my questions may seem a little odd because I'm on the academic side here. I specialize in teach portfolio management. I'm not in the day-to-day thick of implementation. So
Right.
I'm asking a lot of questions from the point of view of best practices and what I might pass on to some of my students.
Got it. And so as soon as you said that, I'm racking my head. Okay, did I say anything mean about our academic side?
No.
I don't think I did.
No, absolutely not. It was all perfectly wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So We love, okay. The other thing about this project request, so we just went through this cycle. We typically start like in May. And we do the call for projects, and budget sends out the memo to all the deans and VPs saying, okay, minor capital call, submit your projects. We give them the link, we give them instructions how to submit their projects. So they do that in May, June, July. We get them sometime in the summer, ITS and facilities. Then we go out and research them, make sure the budget looks semi-good and the scope looks semi-good. And then we start having UPIC meetings in the early fall. And then it goes to the board in December to be approved. And that's for the fiscal year coming up. So we just got the board done with, and that's for fiscal 26. So we're a year and a half in advance. We're asking people, what do you want to do from a project perspective, a year and a half in advance, which in the world of IT, that's like light years in the future, right? Having said that, it's still a decent process to go through, and lets people do a little prior planning.
We do something super similar too. So like we're in the middle, we just put our call for projects out last week. And so we give everyone by, what is it, Sheila, by May, we should have everything buttoned up. So by March, they should submit their things, and it goes through some internal review processes.
Actually, just this week. Just
Yeah.
Monday.
So we do something similar to that. So it's same thing. And so we're planning now for the next fiscal year. So
are you calling for projects that are more departmental focused, that doesn't take a lot of money? Like, oh, we need to do an upgrade of our system, but it doesn't take any money. It's under support, blah, blah, blah.
We don't necessarily we don't base it on money. Like that's one element of how it might be prioritized, or I mean, how it might be factored as a large, medium, or a small project. But we instead said, we tell everyone that if it's a body of work that is outside of your daily operations and it's 80 hours or more, then it should be logged as a project. And then there's a request when they put the request in, if they're looking for like the PMO to support it. Although we might override it anyway, because sometimes they say, no, we don't need the PMO. And we're like, yeah, you do, because it's an enterprise resource. But that's how we put it out there, is we define it with an 80-hour window. And if people don't know, they say, well, I don't know if it's 80 hours. And say, well, put it in, and then we're at least logging the work. And that's been working for us really well. And then,
I think that's the next step we might want to take, is, in conjunction with, or even separate from this budget call for minor cap, is, just everybody else tell us what you see on your horizon coming up for project work, right?
And that's exactly what we do. Yeah, exactly. And then, Jeff, you had brought up like what happens like mid-year. So the first year or 2 years even, we had people panicking, and they're like, well, we don't know if we can forecast out that far, back to what Dan was just saying. And so we had put a separate button on our website where it was like, if you had an off-cycle request that you wanted to put in, that anyone could put it in at that time, and it would go under consideration. And we had just a handful. I mean, so few that we got rid of it, and it's not even an option anymore. It's now if you went on our website, you would just see a little thing that's like, explains what the call for project is, what the time cycle is. And then if it's like, if you have requests outside of this window, please contact your IT executive director, which is more or less a BRM here. And then each college or division has a person that they can go to and say, hey, this came up, I really need help. And then that person, they report into the CIO's office along with the PMO and the rest of us in our enterprise teams. And then we can then kind of collectively take it, look at it, and say, like, do we have the resources to do it? If so, when? And then set the expectation back with the requester. So, so whenever we do, all this whole process, and we talked last month, so I won't repeat everything, but we also put out in our call like a target number of projects. So we say, hey, academic affairs, you have 23 IT projects that you can, that you can plan for next year that you're going to prioritize. Knowing that if you look at the stats, and Sheila can share some of our dashboards and stuff next week or next month, knowing that even though it says 23, there might end up being 35 things done over that year, because projects do come up. Sometimes they're internal and they don't require the enterprise resources. So we say, okay, we'll take those on as much as we can to support you. Or things happen, right? The state system comes and says, this is a new reporting tool that we all have to use. And we're like, okay, we're going to get it done. So we do reserve some burst capacity with those targets. And that's kind of how we're doing our resource management at this point.
Hey, Erin, when you talk about 80 hours of effort, are you talking about what the project sponsor or the person that's otherwise managing or proposing the project thinks it's going to be for the entire team, say the IT group?
Yeah, I mean,
Like
I'm like
how does
famous.
the 80 hours come?
I mean, I
Yeah.
really just care about the IT pieces of the work, to be honest with you. So if it's going to require
Yeah.
our resource teams to be involved for 80 hours or more, then it should be logged as a project. That being said, I'm still just telling everyone, if it's any IT project, even if it doesn't have the resource teams, I would just assume have them log it so we have the visibility. And then we've set up like a dashboard for each one of our different groups. So academic affairs can quickly go in and see all the projects that are, under their division, how big they are, who the sponsors are, what the status is. So we are trying to remind people just to like err on, reporting more instead of less. And so far it's gone pretty well.
And you're focusing on non-operational type activities
No,
too,
anything.
or
Anything that, so even if it's like a banner upgrade, we know it's pretty operational and it has to happen, but if it's a chunk of work, we want to record it. So even if it's not like an
But like if the
initiative, if you will.
like if the network team though is doing a massive lifecycle replacement refresh on switches, are you going to include that? Or a department just purchased 150 classroom computers
Yep.
and they've got to deploy those.
We
Yep.
have several of those right
Okay.
now. We're just going through our
Exactly.
our computer life cycle right now. And so that's something that the PMO is involved in, but it's something that happens pretty regularly, right? So we kind of know what we're up
Yeah.
against. But yes, that's recorded. Now that is a One IT sponsored project, and we make ourselves a special snowflake, and we don't have a target, knowing that we're going to have to do all this work. So that stuff is, even though it's kind of in the course of operations, we're counting that as a project, and that is logged, and we're tracking it.
We do
Awesome.
something very similar. This is our thing, our PMO document in our help desk tool, and it's very. So we try to get rid of the ongoing operations stuff, right? So if it doesn't have an end date, kick it to operations. But we say if it's going to take more than a month, or if there are interdependencies between departments and or suppliers, then would typically be a project. Now that's
I like
a
that.
little bit stuff.
Nice and
I
simple.
like that too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Aaron, I
Especially
will
the
send.
interdependencies one.
Yeah, I will send you this doc. This is what we do. What's a project? Our project management tools, how to log a project request, our methodology. It's pretty standard stuff.
That's great.
I stole this from someplace too. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. But this is, how we have our governance set up for very large or medium projects, all subject to change, obviously, but that's how we have it set up.
Where's your
PM roles.
definition of those, Dan? Large, very large, medium.
That would probably we don't have a strict definition, but it'd probably go into that risk complexity thing I showed earlier. That
Okay.
would help trigger that. And
Good.
then project manager roles, people are always confused about what a project manager does. They think you're going to take over their business functions, and that's not what we're trying to do. And then some best practices. So we want the PMs to schedule all the meetings, and people sometimes have a hard time with that. And so we just wanted a little blurb in there to say, not to tell the PMs they have to do it because they know it, but just to let everybody else to expect that the PMs will be doing it.
I like how concise that is.
Thanks.
Yep. And simple. Simple terminology.
Somebody was just asking how many PMs that we have. So we have at Charlotte about 10 project managers, roughly, a PM or a PMO director and a portfolio manager. And so we do have a lot of by default, we try to have one IT PMO be involved in as many projects as we can, but it's not always possible. So someone was just asking. So yeah, we do have lots of other projects, but we do require that every project has a project manager assigned, even if it's not a PMO person, so that Sheila can go out and bug them that at least, hopefully bi-weekly, but worst case monthly, they're putting regular updates in so that everything is, kept up to date. So. Anything else that anyone wants to talk about, either on this topic or even something different?
It's been a great call. Thanks everyone for sharing.
I try not to let the awkward silence go too long. Like we can wrap up, or if there's other conversation to be had, I'm happy to talk.
One thing to comment about, Dan, that site that you had with your tech squad page, I would love to see it, but you know, you got to log into your page to see it. So somehow you could share that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we started with a Word doc, so I'm sure I can find the original Word doc and that we built this from and send it out there. And
Yeah, anything you share with me, I'll make sure I put it into the Google Drive.
Hey, this is Lauren from George Mason. Whoops, here I am. This is a topic that maybe could be for another session, but I'm curious about how we have project managers that are outside of our PMO that are in other departments in the university. There's a university business consulting department, and then other, academic or non-academic units might have their own project managers. So I'm curious about how other schools, if you have a similar setup, and how that collaboration goes. Just because I've seen cases where it's, we've had ups and downs. Working with facilities project managers, they have their own, and then with others. So I'd be curious to hear others' experience and working with other PMs outside of your PMO.
That would be great. I'm interested in that topic too. I mean, we're dipping our toes in that and trying to create templates that others can use, but we're not really doing a whole lot beyond that, other than making them give us updates every couple of weeks. So that would be a great topic if anyone has a model that they would want to share. I did get an email from Chris Brewster from Drake. So thank you, Chris, has offered to volunteer to present next month to share their project governance and their use of MS Planner and MS Teams to manage portfolio and projects. So that will be a good topic for next month. Sheila here at UNC Charlotte has volunteered to kind of do a little demo of how we're using Smartsheet, so you can see like some of the reports and dashboards and whatnot that we're using to manage the portfolio and projects. There's any other
Erin, I mean, I'm certainly willing to do that, and I'm glad somebody else is going to be doing it too. I'm wondering if we should do the survey and then see what the results of that are before we schedule specific tool demos.
Yeah, that's fine.
What does everybody think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
Are there other topics that people can think of for next month too, or are people interested in kind of sharing? Jeff came off mute, so I feel like, there we go, sorry.
Yeah, a quick comment or question, I guess. It's interesting to me, listening to all of you talk about project management offices and PMOs and 10 project managers, like, wow. And you use project management tools and the like. And I'm curious if there are other people that are on the other end of the spectrum. And what I mean by that are people that maybe you don't have a project management office and you don't use a project management tracking tool, and you have a lot less, and this is probably not the best word to use for it, but a lot less overhead involved with the project intake and then the subsequent execution of those projects. And I'm just curious if there are other people like that are more on that end of the scale, and not so polished and efficient as it looks. Although, like you said, there's an awful lot of ad hoc stuff that comes in, right? Even we do not do calls for projects or anything like that. That's an interesting concept to me, because we've never done that. Although we kind of do that in an informal way, because I try to stay ahead of that, right? And constantly ask people, is there anything common that we need to know about, in the next 6 months to a year that is going to jump out of the bushes and surprise us? Because I want to know about it now, if you know about it now, because like you said, a lot of times things just come up and people aren't aware that that's coming down the road. But it's interesting to me to hear, and it's not a one size fits all, right? What works in one place isn't going to work in another place, but it's still very interesting to me to hear all of you and your different approaches and the different ways you're doing things. So I'm just curious, are there people who are more like us that aren't as polished or have their ducks in a group, so to speak, right? So anyway, just throwing that out there as a comment or a question.
So
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, this is Tamika from the University of Montevallo. We're not there. We're not that polished. We do a call for projects in regards to technology in the different learning spaces on campus, but for overall, we used to have a little bit more robust project intake before COVID hit. And then after COVID, it kind of all just fell to the wayside. And so I'm in the process of trying to build it up. But one of the things I want to kind of implement here is that we do need a PMO office because we got projects that are going every which way and people are kind of stretched. And no one actually knows where a project is, they know who's working on it, but where it stands and how much time is left before we start something else. So I'm gathering all the information that I can to kind of build a case for a PMO office, dedicated person that's do the intake and kind of plan out and map where we are and what we can do. But I will say that we're not this huge institution like some of these other institutions are. We are a small institution. But it's going to take some work to get there. But I'm willing to put in the effort to get us there because I think it's a need.
Yeah, and I'll just speak from FSU's perspective. So we do have a very small project management office. We started down the path of managing very large projects through that project management office. I happen to lead our enterprise systems team, which we're kind of getting those items that have been purchased maybe out in colleges or, as I mentioned earlier, contracts that end and, oh, I have this new thing or this new need that come to us. And often those hours are 80 hours or greater. We did use that metric some number of years ago when we kind of moved away from it. We are actively looking to build both the project management office and our collection. And I love to hear the number of people who are having these calls out to campus, because many times that we think we're communicating, we're not getting all the information that we actually need. So I would also love to hear kind of the from the folks who are in the middle of that building the office, and or if you don't have that office and you have some other method to which you're creating and sharing projects. So again, from the enterprise perspective, my teams are submitting projects in Smartsheet. The PMO office is also using Smartsheet, but those projects have been kept separate up to now, which makes it difficult in also resource allocation. A lot of times the student team is pulled into a number of different projects just because everyone needs to leverage the student data. And so, it's very hard to kind of track it in that space. So I would love to see any conversations, both from the, I guess I'm advocating what you mentioned, Jeff, advocating from both ends. Who's doing it well, who's not doing it, how can we better refine it, what were, kind of the steps that you took to get where you got to successfully.
This might be a great topic for a future session. I suspect that this is actually the silent majority. I convene a group like this that's across all industries, not just higher ed. And I'm very familiar with our membership. And there are a lot of people in that group who are, as you just described, they're on the smaller, lower maturity end, looking at how to grow with limited resources.
This is Charlie. Just a couple of comments because I've worked with really big schools, but a lot of small ones. And the PMO of one, or realistically, the PMO of a 50% time or a 25% time is relatively common. My experience ones that have been the most successful are those that have some pretty good IT governance, i.e. with user executive leadership in there, understanding what's going on in problems, but also understanding that when we come in, I come into school and they go, well, IT always says no to everything. Well, they don't have enough resources. Well, nobody explains that. IT is kind of up having to defend themselves against the onslaught of constant questions. Putting putting a plan together is a good thing. The piece that seems most effective is to work with the CFO and the budget director to say, okay, here is the process for all approval of IT money for the next year for the budget. And we're going to start this 3 months, maybe before the budget process, and put together some sort of process like that to say, there's no money except this path. And that's tended to get people's attention. And then, as Dan said, you know, having a group review, put together some standard format, Google it, steal Dan's stuff, other stuff, but then have people evaluate it, a cross-functional group. And they're the ones are saying yes, no, maybe. But also that says, we don't have resources to do every project. The path to hell is paved with too many good ideas. And so what are the ones that have the biggest payback for us? And so I work with, you know, smaller organizations that saying, here's where the money is. You know, here's where the cheese are for the mice to run after and stuff. And with a reasonable process and all that, it's been fairly successful, but it's starting from ground zero, starting from standing still into the race. You know, you all realize that it's going to take you a while, but that's usually been the key to trying to get some governance and some standard in place.
Yeah, having back many years ago stood up to PMO here at Marquette, I would agree with that. And we started small. You know, we didn't do the big bang approach of let's do time tracking, let's put all the schedules in. We didn't do that, right? We said, okay, what's our most painful thing right now? Is it resources? Is it schedules? Is it simply a collection of all the projects we have? Because when we started, we didn't have a PMO in each area, like applications and networking and systems were doing their own project planning, right? So we started by gathering all those projects and putting them in one big list, and then prioritizing that list of what do we need to prioritize to get done. And that's kind of sort of where we started. And then we just kept building on that success until where we are today. And obviously we have more things to do, but I think we've come a long way from where we started. But I would say, look at your pain. What pain are you experiencing, or the campus is experiencing, and what can you do? What's that first step you can do to help alleviate that pain?
Just wondering, would anyone, I mean, just thinking forward to next month, would anyone maybe either with a smaller PMO group or somebody who's kind of just starting to get your legs under you, be interested in kind of sharing next week with like where you're at, where you're hoping to be, and maybe we could all help you brainstorm some ideas to get you there?
So Ken and I are from FSU, and neither one of us are in the project management office, but I will contact our project management office and see if they'd like to do that. I think it would be very helpful to both see where we are and then hear where you were in your steps of growth and what that next step you took to get where you are. I think it does begin with collecting all, and we are on that roadmap to do that. But there's a wealth of information here, and I think it would be very helpful for us to engage.
Great. Yeah, just let me know. So for now, I've got Drake on for next month. In between, Sheila will coordinate a survey to kind of see what tools people are using and what your plans are for, you know, interest in changing tools or adopting something new. Maybe we'll even do a second survey if people don't mind. Be curious just to see what the size of your PMOs and, how mature you are. That would probably be interesting too. Probably make some good connections that way too, trying to find people who are more, most similar to us. Anything else anyone wants to talk about today? All right, I'll wrap it up. I will try. I have some appointments this afternoon, but worst case is I'll have everything uploaded into Drive tomorrow. I'll email everyone again the location of the Drive. Everyone should have access. If you're in the Google group, it would have defaulted over. But I'll email everyone the link to Drive, and if you're having a problem, just let me know and we can just kind of manually add you in. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all next month.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.